So hello and welcome everyone to the daily news analysis of today, that is 29th of August 2023. So let's dive into the important article from Hindu newspapers. So पहला जो आर्टिकल है, आर्टिकल 35A denied many in the Jammu and Kashmir their rights according to CJI Chief Justice of India. ये पेज नंबर 1 में मिल जाएगा. ISRO to launch Aditya L1 on September 2 to study the sun. After Chandrayaan 3, ISRO is going to launch Aditya L1, which is going to study about the sun from Lagrange point 1. ओके, ये पेज नंबर 1 में मिल जाएगा. सो नेक्स्ट जो आर्टिकल है वो है एट दिल्ली समिट डेमोन्स्ट्रेट क्लाइमेट लीडरशिप. पेज नंबर 6 एडिटोरियल का सेक्शन है. द प्रॉब्लम्स विथ प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स इकोनॉमिक क्लेम्स. द प्रॉब्लम्स विथ प्राइम मिनिस्टर्स इकोनॉमिक क्लेम, पेज नंबर 7. व्हाई वाज WFI सस्पेंडेड बाय यूनाइटेड वर्ल्ड रेसलिंग. पेज नंबर 8 वाला ये मतलब आर्टिकल है. नेक्स्ट जो है लोनेबल फंड थ्योरी, हाउ इंटरेस्ट रेट्स आर डिटरमाइंड इन द लोन मार्केट. इन द लोन मार्केट, हाउ इंटरेस्ट रेट आर डिटरमाइंड बाय RBI और other banks. China releases new map showing territorial claims. Page number 10. Then next जो है moon mission gained from crash analysis according to LPSC chief. Page number 12. Then next जो है प्रज्ञा रोवर encounters crater during moonwalk. 12 नंबर पेज में मिल जाएगा. लास्ट आर्टिकल है पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ नॉट ए पानासिया. ये 14 का आर्टिकल है. पेज नंबर 14 का ये वाला आर्टिकल है. So let's discuss one by one. So first one is Article 35A denied many Jammu and Kashmir their rights according to CJI. Chief Justice of India D.Y. Chandrachud said Article 35A, which empowered the Jammu and Kashmir legislature to define permanent resident of the state and provide them special privileges, denied fundamental rights to others. Article 35A gave special rights and privileges to permanent residents and virtually took away the rights for non-residents. These rights included the rights to equal opportunity of state employment, right to acquire property, and right to settle in Jammu and Kashmir. Chief Justice Chandrachud, heading a constitution bench, observed on Monday. So for non-residents, these rights included right to equal opportunity of state employment, right to acquire property, and right to settle in Jammu and Kashmir. ये 3 आर्टिकल्स नॉन रेसिडेंट्स के लिए अवेलेबिलिटी है. तो नेक्स्ट जो एड्रेसिंग सॉलिसिटर जनरल तुषार मेहता, the chief justice, however, asked whether the center had adhered to the principle of federalism while abrogating Article 370 and abolishing J&K as a full-fledged state. The chief justice said the abrogation was facilitated by first dissolving the J&K state legislature and then proclaiming President's rule under Article 356 on the ground of a breakdown of constitutional machinery in the state. He pointed to the proviso to Article 3, which made it mandatory for President to consult the state legislature before altering the status of a state. The proclamation of a president's rule in December 2018 had done away with the applicability of proviso, but the parliament assumed the rule of Jammu and Kashmir state legislature. The Solicitor General insisted. So are you saying that the parliament would then give its view to itself about the alteration of Jammu and Kashmir from a state of union territory and also enact the law for recognition of the state? Would that really be consistent with the federal structure? Chief Justice Chandrachud asked. Mr. Mehta defended that J&K was still a state for all purposes. It is a state with legislature, everything. Only the police power are with the president. It was a very detailed reorganization, Mr. Mehta assured. Permanent residents of the erstwhile state included people who were hereditary state subjects as in 1927 when J&K was a princely state. Article 35A denied many their rights according to CJI. Article 35A, which was introduced through the Constitution application to Jammu and Kashmir, other 1954 issued by the President under Article 370, demarcated permanent residents with exclusive right to purchase land, seek state government employment and other benefits in education and healthcare. The others were not eligible for these privileges. The Chief Justice noted that Article 35A had even granted immunity from judicial review to these special privileges. This artificially created class of permanent resident alienated people who did not fall within the category. Article 35A further mandated that any law which provides for these special privileges to this class would not violate fundamental rights like Article 14. Right to equality, 19 clause 1 subclause F and 31, then right to property. 19 1 subclause E, right to settle anywhere in the country, and even Article 21, right to life and personal liberty, and 22, protection against preventive detention. That demarcating line between permanent resident and non-residents did this for decades together. It was unthinkable in a constitutional democracy. The government of India with the state government of Jammu and Kashmir added Article 35A. Mr. Mehta submitted. To this, the Chief Justice said, Mr. Solicitor, you are appearing for the Government of India. You, Government of India, did all this in constitutional theory. The Government of India is one perpetual entity, Mr. Mehta said. The Centre corrected itself in August 2019 when it abrogated Article 370 and its creation. Article 35A, I am justifying this correction we made in 2019. I am not saying that or this government, our government, is what I say. The mistakes of the past should not befall the future generation, he replied. The Solicitor General pointed to how people, both Hindus and Muslims, driven out of Pakistan occupied Kashmir in 1947, were not recognized as permanent residents until 2019. The large population of Safai Karmacharis brought to J&K for manual work were not given this status despite residing in the state for years. Article 35A had, had enjoyed a status over and above the ninth schedule laws outside the ambit of judicial review of the constitution, he stressed. Hindrance to J&K's growth. Mr. Mehta said that Article 35A had been a hindrance to the growth and flow of investments into J&K. Despite this, the class of people known as permanent residents were misguided into believing that they were enjoying a privilege that none could take away from them. Here in this case, we have two major political parties defending Article 370 and 35A. But now the people have realized what they had lost all those years. Investment, tourism, etc. have started now. Hotels are being built and 16 lakh tourists have visited Jammu and Kashmir, Mr. Mehta said. So next one is ISRO to launch Aditya L1 on September 2 to study the sun. Aditya L1, India's first space-based observatory to study the sun, will be launched on September 2, Indian Space Research Organization announced on Monday. The spacecraft will lift off at 11:50 a.m. Indian Standard Time from Sriharikota on the day the space agency posted on X, formerly Twitter. According to ISRO, the spacecraft will be placed in hollow orbit around the Lagrange point 1 of the Sun-Earth system, which is about 1.5 million kilometers from the Earth. It is expected to take over 120 days for the spacecraft to reach the L1. The mission profile of Aditya L1 states that a satellite placed in the hollow orbit around the L1 point has the major advantages of continuously viewing the sun without any occultation or eclipses. This will provide a greater advantage of observing the solar activities and its effect on space weather in real time. The spacecraft carries 7 payloads to observe the photosphere, chromosphere, and the outermost layers of Sun. ISRO to learn. Using the special vantage point L1, 4 payloads directly view the Sun, and the remaining 3 payloads carry out in situ studies of particles and fields at the Lagrange point L1, thus providing important scientific studies of the propagatory effect of solar dynamics in the interplanetary medium. The 7 payloads onboard the satellite are visible emission line coronagraph (VELC), solar ultraviolet imaging telescope (SUIT or SUT), solar low energy X-ray spectrometer (SOLEX), high energy L1 orbiting X-ray spectrometer (HELIOS or HEL1OS), Aditya Solar and Wind Particle Experiment Plasma Analyzer Package for Aditya PAPA, and advanced tri-axial high-resolution digital magnet magnetometers. ये है जो 7 पेलोड्स है, ये उसका पूरा डिटेल में उसका नाम दिया गया है, नोट डाउन कर लीजिएगा। तो नेक्स्ट जो आर्टिकल है ओल्ड डिटाइज, ये आपका एडिटोरियल का पोर्शन है, तो चलिए देख लेते हैं इसे। India and Greece are finding new ways to revive an age-old relationship. Speaking after a bilateral meeting with Greece Prime Minister Kyriakos Mitsotakis last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi highlighted that India-Greece bilateral relations have neither been diminished nor has the warmth decreased, despite no Indian Prime Minister having visited Greece since 1983. However, the absence of high-level contact has meant a lack of close strategic ties in the way India has with other nearby countries in Europe such as France, Spain, Italy, Cyprus. To that end, Mr. Modi's visit, which came shortly after Mr. Mitsotakis' re-election in June, sought to leapfrog ties. India and Greece agreed to establish a strategic partnership and announced plans for dialogue mechanism between their national security advisor, apart from plans for a skilled migration and mobility partnership, as well as cooperation to complete negotiation for the India-European Free Trade Negotiation on Connectivity Partnership, while connectivity between the two countries was forged by Alexander's invasion in 326 BCE. Exchanges now have been mainly predicated on tourism trade, about $2 billion, and migration of labor, without a more comprehensive bilateral strategy at play. Speaking to Greek newspaper Kathimerini, Mr. Modi hoped that India's ambition to become a global manufacturing hub would now be melded with Greece's aspirations to become an economic gateway to the European Union. In addition, India and Greece, once plundered by colonial power, have also held discussion on the restoration of artifacts. They may find common cause in pursuing pushing legislation through UNESCO to help restore some of their historical property. Their strategic ties have a strong geopolitical impetus as well. Mr. Modi outreach comes as Greece, which has overcome several years as an economic troublesome spot and once over indebted to China's Chinese investments, seeks to diversify its options. In Greece strengthened in Greece strengthened ties with Israel and Cyprus in what is seen as a coalition to counter Turkey. India might find some common ground given Delhi Ankara tensions over Turkish rule in the OIC and over Kashmir. In addition, India and Greece, once ancient maritime powers, face concerns over the maintenance of maritime security in keeping with international laws. Mr. Mitsotakis referred to the common interests that bind the Eastern Mediterranean and Indo-Pacific region. Loading the landing of Chandrayaan-3, he said it showed favorable omens for relationship between the most populous democracy and the fast democracy, suggesting that both countries used the favorable winds to set the course for more cooperations without allowing another 4 decades to lapse. Next है at Delhi summit demonstrate climate leadership. At Delhi summit demonstrate climate leadership. The G20 members emit most of the world's greenhouse gas emission and produce the bulk of its fossil fuel, but most of them have also pledged to be net zero, cutting back on emissions and fossil fuel use. It is time for the G20 to act as a united group that drives its own collective climate ambition through collaborations, coordination, and competition. The G20 summit in New Delhi, September 9 to 10, is a crucial moment to show leadership ahead of the United Nations Secretary General's Climate Ambition Summit and the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change COP28. Recently, G20 members have shown a degree of commitment to shift towards clean energy, renewable energy sources provided 29% of their energy mix in 2021, an increase from 19% in 2010. India has made significant steps in the last decade to become the world's third largest producer of renewable energy and setting targets to continue the expansion of installed renewables to account for 50% of energy production by 2030. But governments need to create a bigger shift as demand increases and the world's carbon budget is sinking faster than previously thought. Ensure clean governance structure. They will need to focus on three action areas. First, at the national and local level, G20 countries need to improve their governance process for just energy transitions. Government should establish clear governance structure to ensure that the transition process is inclusive and the result equitable and avoid siloed working. This includes clarifying responsibility and mandates between ministries and across government level with the goal of having coherent delivery plans that can attract investment. Progress indicators should go beyond the traditional ones such as net job creation, diversity of manufacturing and regional economic growth to include metrics of the kinds of job created, who has access to them, and levels of border community resilience and innovations. Depending on the country context, G20 countries could establish a multi-ministerial task force or joint working groups between government and non-government actors to coordinate just energy transition efforts. For example, South Africa has developed a just transition framework that was led by the Presidential Climate Commission (PCC). Other G20 members can learn from this approach to accelerate their own just energy transitions by developing concrete framework, roadmaps, or action plans. Adding decarbonization. Second is the Indian G20 presidency has acknowledged the G20 should see this transition as a way to diversify G20 member economies to ensure long-term economic stability, livelihoods, and public revenue streams. International financial institutions have a critical role to play by aligning their investments and risk taking to rapidly deploy vast amount of renewable energy and grid infrastructure and to target support to energy efficiency and very low carbon industrial technologies. For example, the global increase in demand for and production of green steel necessitates the immediate transitions of low carbon steel production pathways. The G20 countries representing 90% of global steel production and 80% of consumption have pivotal role in advancing global low carbon steel production by setting clear mandates for international financial institutions such as multilateral development banks and international climate finance. They can drive investment in green steel transition within developing and emerging economies. A collective commitment by G20 to green public procurement would also accelerate the decarbonization of hard-to-abate sectors such as steel and cement. However, collaboration within and among G20 nations is necessary for effective and ambitious reform in public purchasing. Governments must implement effective minority monitoring, create clear mandates for low carbon procurement, off-scale procurement officers, and set time-bound targets to harness the full potential of green public procurements. Need for transparency. Third, G20 should take a lead in streamlining international efforts to achieve just energy transition. These efforts will be aided by radically improved transparency and accountability, for example, by setting up disclosure mechanism on energy transition related data through existing mechanisms such as the G20 energy transitions and sustainable finance working groups and just energy transition partnership JETPS. The G20 should also encourage fossil fuel producing and countries to provide current, comparable and reliable information about their plans and projects for oil, gas and coal production and how these align with international as well as national climate goals. The race to deploy clean energy for all, to decarbonize industry and to achieve a just and inclusive transition cannot be run alone. By taking a lead in these three action areas, the G20 can ensure this is a relay race that is won together, not at the expense of some countries and communities. The outcome document of July's G20 Energy Transition Ministers meeting called for just, affordable, and inclusive energy transition pathways. But for countries to get onto such pathways, the G20 must act together, collaborating and coordinating steps to achieve net zero ambitions while competing to achieve them. The G20 summit in New Delhi is a crucial moment for the heads of state and government present at the meeting to adopt a strong leaders declaration committing to collective ambitions to combat climate change. In the past few months, the devastating effects of climate change have been clearly shown. There is simply no more time to waste. The problems with the Prime Minister's economic claims. Addressing the BRICS Business Forum leaders in dialogue at Johannesburg last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said soon India will become a 5 trillion economy. In 2018, a working group under the Ministry of Commerce and Industry set 2025 as a deadline for achieving the same. The economic slowdown induced by the COVID-19 pandemic has upended the target deadline. With the revival of the economy now and the general election on the horizon, official rhetoric on this count has resumed while addressing the nation on the 77th Independence Day from the Red Fort. Mr. Modi noted that India was the world's 10th largest economy in 2014, but now stands at fifth spot. He has also invoked a third term in office, saying that India would be among the world's top three economies by then. Even if one ignores the political hubris and sidesteps the serious debate over the methodological rigor of India's GDP estimate, the problems with the Prime Minister's economic claim are manifold. First, Mr. Modi is using nominal gross GDP, gross domestic product, estimate to make claims about the size of the Indian economy relative to the other national economies. This is wrong. Nominal GDP gives an estimate of national output for a year at the price prevailing in that year. However, the actual size of the economy is reflected in real GDP, which is adjusted for price changes. In other words, India can become a 5 trillion economy in nominal terms through high inflation even without any significant changes in the economy's output. It is for this reason that national government and United Nations and other international agencies such as the World Bank and International Monetary Fund base their economic growth estimates on real GDP price adjusted and not nominal GDP estimated at current market price. Second, international comparison between national GDP estimates get further complicated because of exchange rate conversion. Researchers have long held that market-based exchange rates are not the appropriate way in which national GDPs can be converted into a common currency for comparison because of the existence of a substantial share of non-tradable commodities in national output as well as the innate volatility in market determined exchange rates. Going by nominal GDP, the Indian economy valued at $3.39 trillion in 2022, ranked fifth in the world. As Mr. Modi said, however, in terms of real GDP, India's economy in 2022 was a 3 trillion and ranked 6 in the world. PPP based GDP estimates in terms of purchasing power parities estimated through price surveys of a common basket of commodities across countries, so that the Indian economy's size was over 10 trillion dollar economy in 2022. India's PPP-based GDP has consistently expanded from 1990s. India surpassed Germany in 2005 to become the fourth largest economy in the world and Japan in 2009 to become the third largest, a rank that has remained unchanged till date. Table 1 shows the ranking of the for the 10 largest economy in the world in terms of PPP-based GDP, real GDP, and nominal GDP in 2022. The third problem with Mr. Modi's narrative regarding the size of India's economic attaining a new height under his regime relates to its socio-economic implications. Studies in the economic development starts with the premise that, Per capita income and output are the key indicator of a country's standard of living, not the total size of the economy. Having surpassed China as the most populous country in the world, India's per capita income, gross national income, or GNI and GDP continue to remain the lowest among all the countries in G20, as depicted in Table 2. This means that India is the poorest country in the G20 by per capita income. This is not to deny the importance of economic growth in advancing economic development, but to underline the fact that being the most populous country in the world today, India needs to become not just the third largest but the largest economy in the world before it can claim to have attained a dignified living standard for the majority of its people. With almost equal population in 2021, China's per capita income at 2017 prices was $17,504, while India was PPV $6,590. Brazil's per capita GNI was PPV paid 14,370 and South Africa's PPV $12,948. India's low per capita income is further compounded by the skewed distribution of that income. 21.7% of its pre-tax national income went to top 1% of the population in 2021, while only 13% went to bottom 50% of the population. Chart 3. While in Brazil 9.1%, South Africa 5.8% to share the share of national income from for the bottom 50% was even lower than India. China 13.7% and Russia 15.7% had higher income shares. This unfair reality of the top 1% concerning a disproportionate share of the national income in emerging economies gets concealed by the official rhetoric on trillion-dollar GDPs and their growth. If India aspires to catch up with China or the US in terms of GDP and per capita income, it needs to move beyond rhetoric and augment resource mobilization and real investment in physical and human capital to levels much higher than what has been achieved till date. The next day, why was the WFI suspended by United World Wrestling? In the backdrop of wrestlers' protest over various issues, United World Wrestling, the world governing body for sport, has provisionally suspended the Wrestling Federation of India primarily for not conducting its election on time. What is the impact? As per the UWW letter to the Indian Olympic Association appointed ad hoc committee which is running the WFI in the absence of an elected body, wrestlers and their support personnel, individuals with the sorry, individuals with a high performance medical or technical roles such as coach, assistant coach, sport physician, or masters remain on remain authorized to participate in all UWW sanctioned events. That is all event of on the UWW calendar. However, they shall do so under UWW flag. This means that Indian wrestler cannot compete under the national flag in UWW events, including the World Championship in Belgrade in September. No national anthem will be played in if an Indian wrestler wins a gold medal. What caused the delay? Yet some prominent wrestlers, including Olympic medalist Bajrang Punia and Sakshi Malik and World Championship medalist Vinesh Phogat, brought allegations of sexual harassment, intimidation, financial irregularities, and administrative lapse against the then WFI President Sharan Singh and others, and set in protest at Delhi's Jantar Mantar in January. The Union Sports Ministry asked the Federation chief to step aside under the MC Mary Kom headed oversight committee completed its inquiry. After the inquiry, even though the OC report was not made public, the WFI on April 16 announced that its elections, which were due in February, would be held on May 7. The wrestlers then returned to the protest site and demanded the arrest of former WFI president. They also demanded that Brijbhushan's family members should be stopped from contesting the elections. Brijbhushan himself was not eligible to contest the WFI polls after completing 3 terms, 12 years. The ministry halted the polls on April 24 and asked the IOA to form an ad hoc committee to complete the election process within 45 days. In May, both the International Olympic Committee and UWW asked the IOA to conduct the WFI polls within the stipulated time frame. The IOA appointed Justice retired M. Kumar as the returning officer for the WFI election on June 12, which the which the polls were scheduled for July 6. Meanwhile, the UWW on July 3 had warned about the WFI's possible suspension. Disgruntled state associations seeking voting rights caused further delays. Stays on election first by Guwahati High Court on June 25 and then by the Punjab and Haryana High Court on August 11, a day before the latest date fixed for election, were significant. Therefore, UWW Description Chamber dis- disciplinary disciplinary chamber found sufficient ground to provisionally suspend the WFI due to the prevailing situation for at least 6 months. The absence of an elected president and a board did not comply with UWW regulation and its conditions for membership. The chamber also considered the protection of athletes after the allegation against the former WFI president and the necessity to restore the functioning of the federation as another ground to suspend the national body. What is the way forward? Even as Brijbhushan, a six-time influential member of parliament from Uttar Pradesh and Bharatiya Janata Party strongman, maintains a firm hold over majority of WFI state units. The wrestlers desperately trying to keep Brijbhushan's loyalists out of power have found a few candidates of their choice in the election. Different factions of the WFI need to realize the immense loss the sport has suffered because of the ongoing issue. The only way to bail the country out of international ignominy and give the athletes their rights to compete under the tricolor is to conduct the WFI election in a free and fair manner. Loanable fund theory: how interest rates are determined in the loan market. Also known as the New Classical Theory of Interest, this theory argues that the interest rate on the loan are determined by the supply of and demand for loans in the market for loanable funds. In other words, the market interest rate is seen as the price of loans, and it is thought to be determined just the way the price of any other good and service. good or service is determined in the market. So a rise in supply of loanable funds from several such as household is believed to cause household is believed to cause the market interest rate to drop while a drop in the supply of funds is seen as causing a rise in market interest rate. On the other hand, a rise in the demand for funds from borrowers such as business and government is supposed to cause a rise in interest rate while a drop in their demand for funds is expected to cause a fall in interest rates. In short, the supply of funds from the lender and the demand for funds from borrower are seen as influencing the market interest rate. Interest as compensation. Loanable fund theorists argue that the interest paid on loan offers an incentive for savers to lend their money since they need to wait a certain period of time before they can get their original investment back. In other words, interest is seen as a fair compensation paid to savers for waiting. On the other hand, the rate that borrowers are willing to pay on loans is said to be determined by the return that these borrowers expect to earn by investing the borrowed funds or marginal productivity of capital. Finally, the market interest rate is seen as the equilibrium price that equals to supply of a saving with the demand for loans in the market and which is mutually beneficial to savers and borrowers. The loanable funds theory, which is attributed to the Swadeshi economist Knut Wicksell, is seen as applying not just to the interest rate charged on loans. It is also said to apply the other credit transactions such as those in the bond market where businesses and governments issue bonds to borrow money from savers. A critic. Not all economists, however, agree with the loanable funds theory of interest rate. Economists who believe in the pure time preferences theory of interest, for instance, argue that the interest rate is not the price paid by borrowers for a loan, but rather the price that savers actually pay for future goods or money. While this claims is quite counterintuitive, the fact that the interest rate is determined not by borrowers but by what savers or lenders are willing to pay for future goods or the money is more obvious in the bond market than in the loan market. In the bond market, borrowers issue bonds that promise to pay a certain amount of cash over the future, and the interest rate on these bonds are determined by what lenders are willing to pay for these bonds that offer future cash flow. If the price of a bond is set too high by the bonds issuer, thus yielding very little interest to lender, then a part of the issues may be left unsold. On the other hand, if the price of a bond is set too low, then the bonds may be oversold with lenders unable to buy as many bonds as they had wanted. Similarly, interest rate on banks loan are also ultimately determined by what lenders are willing to pay for future money rather than by borrowers. It is common for many economists to believe that a high rate of interest offers more incentive for lender to part with their money. Pure time preference theorists, however, note that strictly speaking, the interest rate is not an incentive or reward for people to save and lend more. In fact, the directions of concessions runs the other way around. Interest rates are the result, not the cause of the preference of people to save and invest. Hence, it would be erroneous to argue that a high rate of interest encourages people to save and lend more. A high rate of interest in a country could actually be a sign of low confidence among people to lend their money. It is also common to hear in the popular press that low interest rates would induce borrowers to borrow more money and thus increase demand for loans. The problem with this impression, as the pure time reference theorists argue, is that strictly speaking there really is no such thing as a demand for loans from borrowers. As clarified earlier, what is really being sold in the market for loanable fund is the right to future money for which lenders, not borrowers, bid. China releases new map showing territorial claims. The Chinese government on Monday released the 2023 edition of the Standard Map of China, which continues to show the entire state of Arunachal Pradesh and Aksai Chin region within China's border. The 2023 map was released by the Ministry of National Resources. The territorial claims on China's western borders is also the so-called dash line covering the entire South China Sea are shown on the map. As in previous edition, also as previous map, a tenth dash is placed east of Taiwan, underlying Beijing's claims over the island. The latest map follows Beijing's announcement in April that it would standardize the names of 11 places in Arunachal Pradesh, including a town close to Arunachal Pradesh capital of Itanagar. This was the third such list renaming place in Arunachal Pradesh and was seen by observers as a response to India holding event in the lead up to G20 summit in the state, which Beijing had opposed. Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to attend the summit in New Delhi on September 9 and 10. The 2023 map state media reported was released during what is being called the National Mapping Awareness Publicity Week in China. Following the release of the standard map for public use, the Ministry of Natural Resources will also release digital map and navigation and positioning for use in various fields including location-based services, precision agriculture, platform economy, and intelligent connected vehicles. The report said this year marks the 30-year anniversary of the law of surveying and mapping of the People's Republic of China, which was passed to strengthen the administration of the surveying and mapping undertaking, promote its development and ensure that it renders service to dep- development of the national economy, the building up of national defense and progress of society. Under Mr. Xi, Beijing has tightened management of border areas, passing in 2022 a border law that lists responsibility for civilian and military authorities to take steps to safeguard national sovereignty. The issuing of new The issuing of new names is related to Article 7 of the law, which calls for promoting border education at all levels of government. Article 22 calls for the Chinese military to carry out border drills and to resolutely prevent, stop, and combat what it calls invasion, encroachment, and provocations. नेक्स्ट जो दो आर्टिकल है मून मिशन गेंट फ्रॉम क्रैश एनालिसिस एंड नेक्स्ट वन इज प्रज्ञा रोवर encounters crater during moonwalk. The August 23 moon landing scored by the Indian Space Research Organization with its Chandrayaan 3 mission is also the story of how an efficient performance analysis helped the space agency bounce back in style from a setback. V. Narayanan, Director Liquid Propulsion System Center (LPSC), has noted. Dr. Narayanan, who has headed the LPSC since January 2018, had chaired the national level expert committee which analyzed the reasons for the 2019 Chandrayaan 2 lander crash and recommended improvements that were incorporated in Chandrayaan 3. A multidisciplinary review by the nine-member panel had analyzed all aspects of the Chandrayaan-2 spacecraft's performance and submitted its report within a month. Improvements were recommended by the most of the systems to enhance their reliability. Practically all the recommendations barring one or two which were not seen as vital were implemented, Dr. Narayan told The Hindu on Monday. The Chandrayaan-2 mission launched in July 2019 from Sriharikota had performed normally until contact with its Vikram lander was lost at an altitude of 2.1 km amid its descent to the landing site. The committee suggested improvement to the software packages, the navigation guidance control system, the propulsion mechanism, and the powered descent scheme, and the Vikram lander system, among other things. Its recommendation included enhancing the propellant margin in the spacecraft and strengthening the lander legs. The entire software system was verified, validated, and strengthened because once the powered descent to the lunar surface starts, everything is autonomous and has to work with precision. Dr. Narayan said, "Perfect mission." A rocket propulsion expert who began his career with ISRO in 1984, he described Chandrayaan 3 as a perfect mission where all components functioned splendidly to make India the first nation to soft land on the lunar south pole. The ISRO's Liquid Propulsion Community (LPSC) and the ISRO's propulsion complex Mahendra Giri made vital contribution to the Chandrayaan 3 mission. He said the LPSC contributed four propulsion systems: the L110 core liquid stage and the C-25 cryogenic upper stage for the LVM-3 launch vehicle, one for the propulsion module and one for the Vikram lander which touched down on the lunar surface. Dr. Narayan, who holds an MTech in cryogenic engineering and a PhD in aerospace engineering, has played major role in the development of cryogenic propulsion system in the ISRO, including the C-25 cryogenic upper stage of the LVM-3 rocket. The next article जो है Pragyan rover encounters scattered during moonwalk. The Indian Space Research Organization has released an image image taken by Chandrayaan 3's rover module Pragyan. Two images taken by Pragyan's navigation camera are the first to be released by the space agency after the rover rolled down from Vikram lander onto the lunar surface on August 23. The ISRO said the rover encountered a 4-meter diameter crater while traversing on the lunar surface on August 27, and to avoid that it retraced its path and is now headed on a new path. While one of the two images shared by the ISRO on Monday shows the crater and the second shows the path retraced by the rover. On August 27, 2023, the rover came across a 4-meter diameter crater positioned 3 meters ahead of its location. The rover was commanded to retrace the path. It is now safely heading on a new path, ISRO posted on X. ISRO on Sunday released the first observation from CHA-STE payload on board the Vikram lander of the country's third lunar mission Chandrayaan 3. देन आज का जो लास्ट आर्टिकल है वो है पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ नॉट ए पैनासिया। पॉपुलेशन ग्रोथ नॉट ए पैनासिया। India's growing population can help boost its labor force, but it is not enough to make the economy stronger, said Moody's. The rating body says strong education and quality infrastructure are also key to reaping the benefit of larger population. India's population growth would raise its labor force availability, but that alone won't be enough to make the economy stronger or improve physical outcomes. Due to the quality of education in the country, Moody's Investors Service said in a report on Monday, emphasizing that better education outcomes will help countries like India avoid potential job loss from digitalization and artificial intelligence in the long run, especially in services like call centers and BPOs. Moody's bracketed India's current education outcomes level with that of Pakistan, that Bangladesh, in a report titled Population Growth Alone with Not a Drive Credit Benefit for Emerging Economies. The rating measure said it expects continued population growth in the region to support economic explanations as working age populations will remain large compared with younger and older citizens. However, the availability and scale of labor inputs alone will not drive materially stronger economic strength or better fiscal outcomes. Other conditions such as education and quality infrastructure are also key to reaping the benefits, it noted. There remains a considerable gap in the quality of education between Pakistan, Bangladesh, and India compared with China and other kids in Southeast Asia, which contributes to labor force participation imbalances. Moody's added. India, Bangladesh, Indonesia, Pakistan, the Philippines, and Vietnam will account for a third of the global population increase over the next 20 years, and 40% of the uptick in working age population, the agency reckoned. Moody's said the difference in the proportion of the male and female population that has completed an upper secondary education was most pronounced in India and Bangladesh. So thank you everyone for today DNA, and we will continue from tomorrow onwards from the important article for the important article of the Hindu daily newspaper. So thank you everyone.